Hello, and welcome to Mr Murica, the Bearded Truth, covering political and social issues one liberty at a time, with entertaining insights of current events and important discussions on topics that affect us all, shining the torch of liberty and brightening the future by bringing libertarianism into our everyday life. And now, your host, the friendly neighborhood libertarian, Jason Lyon, Mr Murica, the Bearded Truth on Muddied Waters Media.
Hello everybody, welcome in. It is Friday, and you know what Friday means? It means you got another episode of Mr Murica, the Bearded Truth. I'm so glad that you guys are here. Of course, this is a Muddy Waters Media production, which means that you can find this and every other episode on muddywatersmedia.com, where I hope you guys will head over to and check that out. We've got a banger for you guys today. Imagine this in a world in Florida, where Marco Rubio is your current senator, you could have somebody that's so much better. Well, I am honored and privileged to be bringing him on today. And of course, Dennis Misigoy. This is going to be an incredible conversation. I'm so excited for this. Dennis is an incredible speaker on the libertarian issues. He's got the well-roundedness to understand the circumstances from both sides, to be able to convince the hearts or to change the hearts and minds of so many Americans, not just there in Florida but around the country. So I'm excited for today's conversation. But before we get there, you guys know I've got to do some house cleaning. So oh no, I just cleaned out my page on accident. Big thank yous, of course, to Matt and Spike for continuing to give me a platform to come out here to talk about my views, my opinions, and my stances on everything and anything out there, to be the neighborhood-friendly libertarian as the intro goes. Thank you to Brian Scott Lambrick and Jenny for that intro that we use on every episode here. And of course, if you guys are watching this on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Float, wherever, however you're watching this live, thank you guys so much. Thank you for interacting in the comment section, for liking each other's comments, for hitting the share button, sharing it out to your friends and family members, spreading the message of liberty with one share button at a time. Thank you guys so much for that. If you guys are listening to this later on the podcast, where you can find it on any podcast app, thank you guys so much for that. And of course, if you guys are looking to lean into getting the third exclusive episode of Muddy Waters Media, or Muddy Waters of Freedom with Matt and Spike, you guys can head over to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters/subscribe. And from there, you'll get the third episode. You'll be getting Muddied Murica, myself and Matt Wright, sitting down to parse through the incredible current events. Of course, these are always daunting and just heartbreaking events. We went over the Uvalde shooting 2 weeks ago, so that one's up. If you guys missed it, go ahead on over there, check that out. If you guys are looking to rep Muddy Waters Media everywhere you go, head over to muddywatersmedia.com/store, where you can get the beautiful merch that we have. Whew! Got through that, but there's still more. But wait, there's more. Are you guys looking to see more of me and Matt, or me and Spike? Well, head on over to rebrand.ly/CJR. This is going to be a training summit on criminal justice reform, on getting out, being activated. This is going to be in Columbus, Ohio, August 20th to 21st. That's a Saturday and Sunday. We're going to be training, networking, learning. It's a free event for all ages. They give you food, so don't worry about that. Get on over there. Check this event out. Head over to rebrand.ly/CJR. Spike Cohen will be there. We will have a wide berth of coalitions in order to work on multitude of issues within the criminal justice reform. We're going to be talking about medical cannabis. We're going to be talking about recreational cannabis. We're going to be talking about cash bail reform. We're going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking a little bit about civil asset forfeiture, because that's near and dear to my heart, of course. We're going to be talking about so many different things, so that even if it's not necessarily applicable to AFP Ohio, who is holding this event, you will be able to take things home to your home state if you're not from Ohio. Or if you're there in Ohio, you'll be able to pair up with people there to move liberty forward through criminal justice reform. So make sure you guys are getting over there. November 8th. It's a short time coming away, but we have an incredible event down in Brevard, Florida. On November 8th, election night, you could be joining myself, Spike Cohen, Jordan Marlowe, and plenty of others, including Shelly the Brazilian porcupine, for an incredible night down at the zoo. What are you going to get beyond just seeing all of us? You're going to be linked up with some people that are truly making Liberty rise in their county. Brevard, Florida, put them on your map, put them on your radar, check them out. They're doing incredible things. If you're looking to attend, right there, lpbrevard.com or .org/gala. If you're looking to spread your online business, your podcast, whatever it is, however it is, head on down there, lpbrevard.org/gala sponsors. You will also see in attendance there, because of the star-studded event that we have, you will see superfan Sarah Ann Wright. Ooh, did I just misspeak? No, of course not. They're getting married, and you guys will be one of the first couple people to see Sarah Ann Wright along with Matt Wright. Muddy Waters media team will be there. Not a Real Libertarian podcast team will be there. It's going to be an incredible event. Make sure you guys are getting down there and checking it out. While we're talking about amazing events, while we're talking to a future U.S. Senator from Florida, while we're in campaign season because it is 2022, if you guys have a business, you guys are a candidate, you guys are holding events, head on over to KelseyLionDesigns.com. She will revolutionize your branding. She will take your marketing to the next level. She will make sure that she's squeezing every bit out of ingenuity and creativity out of her brain and putting it up for your business. She has raving reviews. She couldn't do no wrong for the market that you're trying to reach into. So head on over to KelseyLionDesigns.com, use the code Muddy Waters. She'll hook you up with a nice little discount. I guarantee you won't regret it. And last but not least, nug of knowledge. Everyone's looking for a little knowledge. Everyone's looking for a little nug. Everyone's looking for a little love. So head on over to nugofknowledge.com. Use the code Bearded Truth. You're going to get 10% off. They're going to ship you some fun love, and it's going to be coming in the package of a nug of knowledge. So head on over to nugofknowledge.com. Use the code Bearded Truth, and you can get yours today. And with that, if you guys could, please put your hands together. Welcome on, Mr. Dennis Misigoy. How are you doing today, sir?
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's for the kind intro. I'm doing well. As I mentioned to you before, it's been a I guess a little bit more stressful last couple weeks, just kind of leading up to qualification. But having hit that big milestone, that takes a little bit of a weight off my shoulder. It just means now that I have to now really continue planning and do a little bit more of this, put in a little bit more of the work here. So, but that's what we signed up for. So that's what I'm here for, man. So thank you again for bringing me on.
Thank you for coming on. And this is on the end, on the other side of, as you were saying, of making it onto the ballot officially, of having to fight through all of the ballot access issues that all the third party candidates have to face because we're not part of that uniparty, that duopoly. You look so well rested and refreshed and ready to go because fighting the good fight to get on the ballot. Yeah. Fighting the good fight to get on the ballot is just a tenth of the battle. And now we're going to unseat Marco Rubio. And I would, if I was a betting man, I would not bet against you. I'm so incredibly excited for this race, for what you guys are doing. So it's going to be a beautiful time. I'm so excited for this. For anyone watching, if you guys check the comments section below, or not the comment section, in the description below, you have his link. This is somebody who, he is going to be going out and campaigning. He's going to be doing events, but one of the big things is distribution, and distribution of signs, of bumper stickers, of things like that. You guys can help out, and there it is right there, Misigoy.com. Head on over there, give them some love, give them some donations, spread the word. If you got friends and family in the area, let him be the messenger of liberty, and just give him the site and say, hey, check him out, see where he's wrong. They won't. Yeah. They can't.
And to give the to do what Spike said, when I was doing a little event talking with Spike, what he kind of suggested is I just tell everybody, give until right before it hurts. We need whatever we can get, and it's something that goes back to like the one little brief conversation I had The first time I met Justin Amash when he came to speak at Florida's state convention last year, which was just, kind of what do we have to learn from the big parties? What is it that we really need to pick up? And he said, really, they're not any better or any less dysfunctional. They just have more resources. And so that's really the big stumbling block for us is being able to have the resources to do all these sort of things to reach people. Obviously, I don't think we're going to match them, and I don't think we need to, because I think we have the better message. Their strategy is to just flood people with these things and overwhelm them with it. For us, it's just opening their eyes. Something we were talking about in terms of what gets us motivated and what gets us engaged. I don't want to say excited about politics, but engaged in politics is the fact that we have come to understand certain things about the reality and the challenges that we face as a nation today. And we'll get into some of those specific things. But once you come to an awareness of it, you kind of really just have to sit there and be, well, I'm going to either have to do something about it. I have to take some kind of action. I mean, I just have to. There's not even really an or for me. It's just you got to do something. Yeah. You can't sit still. So
it's one of those things, and we were talking about a little in the pre-show of, people look at us and they say, you guys must really love politics. You guys have to love this stuff because we pour every bit of our love, sweat, tears, blood, everything into making a change for our future. And coming off of looking at your issues on your website, it's a difference of, we see these things and they've been so egregiously wrong that it compels us to do something. It compels us to go beat our head up against a brick wall for a couple days straight and then go, I'm feeling fine, let's go do it again the next day. It's a brutally painful process, and it's through the connections of our communities that's helped us keep us going, and it's through efforts like yours to getting on the ballot, to fighting against the monster that is just ballot access. Now you're on the ballot. Now you're going to have trillions of voters. I think inflation's affecting this. Trillions of voters there in Florida, in order to
affect all the mail-in ballots.
exactly. But you're going to have so many more supporters and people waking up to the ideas that, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are just trying to give you emotional responses to a lot of things, and they're not actually educating the people on why it is what they've done is wrong. But rather they double down and they keep making it worse. And so if you guys haven't already, head on over there, check out his website after the show. Don't leave during. Go check it out after the show. But it's well worth the read. But so today, kind of the conversation in the way that, I thought would be very beneficial for us is that when we talk about these specific topics, oftentimes because they are so much different than what we're receiving from the Republicans and the Democrats, where it's like build, like you got to build back better onto these bills in order to make them better. But we actually talk about the ideas of what's in them, and because there's such a contrast between what the average person is seeing and what we as libertarians understand and put forth, that is difficult for people to accept. But by you getting on the ballot, by you being out there and being such a great activist and advocate for liberty, you've been through these conversations and you've got a lot of things where you've pointed them out directly. And so, right now, one thing that I used to do every episode was we would talk about Yemen, and we would talk about the updates of what's been going on in Yemen. You've got some news for us, some borderline breaking news if I was a newscaster, on what's going on.
Go ahead. I'm certainly not the first person to bring this stuff out. But two of the things that have been going on, two sort of things kind of interestingly kind of going on in parallel, which is on the one hand, you have, as a seemingly positive sign, you got a war powers resolution coming out of the House to withdraw U.S. support again from Saudi Arabia's war of genocide on Yemen. And actually, if I just take a quick step back to kind of when you were talking about, it's not that we like politics. It's just that I hate certain of these things which are going on. So I hate these wars that are, killing droves of innocent people, and for a cherry on top, also bankrupting the country. But, it really is the suffering and just unmitigated disaster and the harm and the horrors that are being done to so many people. It is really should be what morally outrages us about much of the foreign interventions. And there's more to it than that even, but so that is one thing. I mean, we did have, I think, a resolution like that. I'm trying to think it was 2018 or 2019, and Trump vetoed it. Biden came into office actually promising that he was going to withdraw U.S. support and he was going to, treat Saudi Arabia like as a pariah, or that he was going to, in general, hold nations accountable for human rights violations. And he's done obviously not that. We're almost 2 years. We're a year and a half into his term, and that has not occurred, obviously. And but we have this resolution. There's some concern about the what's the word? The effectiveness, or the likely effectiveness if it were to pass. There's an interesting conversation actually I saw between, this was on Twitter, but this was a conversation between Justin Amash and Scott Horton of antiwar.com, and talking about sort of these word games that they play in there. So where they have, they qualify not doing anything offensive as this sort of background. So where there's a real possibility that even if they did manage to pass this resolution and the president were to sign it, they could still be continuing to do this stuff. And it may just still be business as usual. They may just spend a little more money on manufacturing intel that will justify, because at the end, after all these people get killed, who's gonna argue the contradictory position that this was an offense rather than defense? And really, even how are we going to draw those lines? We just need to get out of there. We just need to be not involved. And there shouldn't be any equivocation or any there's just no excuse, put it that way. And like I said, sort of in parallel at the same time, we actually have Biden sending in troops into Yemen. And and my understanding, I didn't quite see it in the articles that I had read, but I had heard it mentioned offhand by someone else that this was being justified based on and maybe this was in the letter he sent to Congress, justified based on the authorization for the use of military force that was passed after 9/11. Obviously, to go after the guys who did 9/11, who none of them are in Yemen, has nothing to do with what's going on there. Matter of fact, what was it? 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi citizens or something, I think.
Yeah.
But here we are helping the Saudis out again, and so.
It was incredible when you look at that circumstance, and when you were talking about the Justin Amash and Scott Horton conversation. Really, what that boils down to is, what is an offensive measure, and the way that I've seen it broken down the most was, go ahead and pick up your AR-15 or whatever quote-unquote weapon of war you want. Go sit in your neighbor's house and then be like, I'm defending myself when they try to kick you out of your property. It's not there's no way to perceive that as an offensive measure, or not as an offensive measure, when we're literally halfway around the country in these circumstances. And so it's incredibly important that with the way that some of this is being addressed, and some of these things we're trying to change the perception on it. And I've seen the memes where it's like, you have somebody that looks like they're about to be stabbed, but then you look at the bigger picture and you're like, wait a minute, the guy trying to be stabbed is the one invoking a lot of the problems and everything else. So I think looking at the circumstance as a whole, we see where Saudi Arabia, right, when President Trump, I think it was 2018, when he vetoed it, this was a bipartisan resolution passed in the House and the Senate. He vetoed it and said, Saudi Arabia is selling us, or we're selling too many arms to Saudi Arabia for this to not be beneficial. It was an arms deal. We are literally supporting an attempted genocide. 600,000 children have been killed in Yemen. Humanitarian aid being blockaded, just the most egregious circumstance ever. And it really
is also like one of these, just again, the sort of worst, and you go back to really where it started again, was Obama trying to placate the Saudis because it inadvertently helped out the Iranians by getting rid of Saddam and basically creating what ended up being a very Iran-friendly Iraq. So none of this makes any sense. It has nothing to do with America's any sort of, and I don't even like using the term, but this sort of myth of our national interest as a justification for any of this sort of stuff is absolutely bonkers. And yeah, and I thought it was sort of instructive, and so one of these things where was one of these things that I like to point to when whenever I'd get into it, certainly with some Republicans who were like, "Hey, Trump isn't like these guys," and he was speaking out against this and that, or he pushed to get us out of Afghanistan or whatever. This was one of those things that's very instructive for me. It says like, look, the Congress, and this is pretty rare for having the Congress to come together and
Yes.
vote to withdraw the U.S. support from a military conflict, proxy war, or us just directly involved in a war. That's pretty rare enough. And he vetoed that. And he didn't veto a whole lot of things. So you
No.
think this is the kind of thing that gets him out of bed to go use that veto pen. Was this not not the omnibus spending bill that nobody in the House read? It wasn't any of that stuff. It was, we got to make sure we keep doing business with the Saudis and helping them, kill all these people there. And we try to run numbers and throw out numbers, and I hear a lot of estimates. But I was listening to, I think it's the last episode Scott Horton had on with, I can't remember the lady's name, but she's works with an organization that tries to do aid in Yemen, and people are dying in their homes and nobody's able to come and do this stuff. The situation there is so bad. It's going to be hard to really have an accurate count of the death toll, and that should be enough to give people sort of a realization of just how bad it is. I think it's universally, I think, considered the worst man-made, human catastrophe, human rights violation, everything going on today. And we're supporting it, and we're still supporting it. And the president is adding support for it at this point, even though he campaigned, or I don't know if to say he campaigned, because I don't know how much of an issue that is to move the needle, but he did make a promise about it. He did say, here's what we're going to do. And obviously became president, and that's not what he's doing. It's nothing new for these guys.
No,
but it's again, it's another glaring example. And it's something that, we need to hold these guys to the fire. And I will say this one other thing, because here's where the rubber meets the road. So I'm glad when people and activists, and you have a grassroots effort that's able to put pressure and get, the R's and D's in Washington, D.C. to write a resolution like this and maybe even get it passed. So that's good. But, these guys are still there. And okay, maybe this passes, but they work around it because of the language, is they're playing the word games. Or maybe he follows in Trump's footsteps and he vetoes it too. I don't know. Yeah. But you know what else is going to happen? And I just heard the estimate, which I don't know if I can say that it blows my mind, because it's just more of the same. But what they were working out of the Senate, I think it's, I forget exactly the committee, but they're working on the NDAA for the next year. A proposal around 850 some odd billion. Okay. It was over $750 billion for this year. And they're looking at more than 4/5 $1 trillion for next year. And these guys are all going to rubber stamp it. Marco Rubio rubber stamps it. Val Demings rubber stamps it. And that's what this establishment keeps doing. So even if they vote to do this sort of thing, to whether it's toothless or not, this resolution to withdraw U.S. support from this conflict, they're certainly not going to hold the defense establishment, the foreign policy establishment, the military-industrial complex. They're not going to hold them accountable, and they're not going to restrain them by restraining them. Really, the one thing they have control on, they have to give them the resources. If they don't give it to them, they don't have it. But they will always do it. Those guys will always do it. And that is one thing that is a sharp contrast, is that I am not going to keep voting for that stuff. The U.S. defense budget, military budget, whatever you want to call it, that should be cut in half. Okay. Yeah. We could cut it in half and we'd still be, by more than 100 billion, the biggest spender in the world on this stuff. It is, it's embarrassment. It's disgusting. And it's a misallocation of resources, to be perfectly honest, as well. Yeah. But even if you want to be the biggest, baddest in the world, you could cut it in half, literally in half, and you would still be far and away the biggest and baddest in the world. So there's no excuse for it. And you got to hold these guys. You got to do something to restrain these guys. You got to do something. And okay, this resolution, I hope it passes, and I hope it really stops it. Truly, for the people who are really deeply affected here, the victims in Yemen, and probably I would imagine in some of the neighboring areas as well, but regardless, um, you know, that's really what it's about. But at the same time, the question is, how willing are these guys? Are they to stand up to this establishment in a meaningful way? The resolution, it'll be good if it passes, but let's see. We got to wait and see. I hope, but we got to wait and see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, how this plays out. Historically speaking, right? You had Obama, who came in. He was the anti-war candidate. He came in, didn't stop anything. He actually brought us into a lot more wars. President Trump was the
anti. This one,
yeah,
President of Yemen.
Yep, exactly. 2015, he brought us in, and so then you had President Trump come in, and President Trump was the anti-war candidate, pulled us out of no wars, vetoed pulling out of Yemen. And then you had Joe Biden being like, no, I'm the anti-war candidate. Let me just fumble
I'll do you one better.
Go ahead.
I'll do you one better. George W. Bush, when he campaigned in 2000, was a humble foreign policy, no nation building, none of this stuff. This was in sort of reaction to Clinton getting involved in, in the Balkans and all that. What was sort of perceived as him trying to create distractions from other things. But this whole sort of, we shouldn't be getting involved in that sort of thing. Even Bush, even W ran on this, and obviously, and someone can make the excuse and say, well, then 9/11 happened, and you can kind of make that excuse, but the reality is that, and this came out a long time ago. I believe it was like their first cabinet meeting. They were talking about how can we get in a war with Iraq. I mean, that was from the get-go. That was on the agenda, and if you haven't had the opportunity, it's something I heard. When reading the Enough Already, I keep referencing Scott Horton just because he's great on this stuff. But Bush, a few years before, Bush, before he ran for president, maybe a couple of years before, in some interview, kind of talking and musing about this thing that to be like a great president, you have to be a wartime president, and also talking about how it was a failure of his father to not go after Saddam and get rid of him. But it's this sort of stuff that when you look back on it in context now, it really kind of gives you an idea and an understanding that this was kind of his vision for how he wanted to create a legacy, and he was just looking for the way, because we all know that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. 9/11 happened, and it was great for his approval rating. It wasn't great for the rest of us. It was great for the Defense Department because I don't know if you've ever seen the video, what was it, September 10th of 2001, with Donald Rumsfeld coming out and announcing that, we've got like $2 trillion that we have no idea where it went. Getting up,
and then nobody cared.
Find that clip in a lot of places, and everybody forgot about the next day, and it's understandable. But and this is something, and I'm going to kind of transition to another topic, which is the topic of gun control after the Uvalde shooting and the other mass shootings, is that, with what happened after 9/11, and what does not happen, or let me say, what happened after that and what happens after events like this, is that everybody's responding emotionally to like a trauma, to this big event. And it's these knee-jerk reactions in terms of, and very simple, not very well thought out kind of responses. In reality, what the politicians want to do is typically, and it's, what is the cliche? They say it openly, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they're always trying to weaponize these things to pass or do the stuff that they wanted to do from the beginning anyway. Stuff that wasn't, it's not like really a reaction to these things. They're just using these things to try to do stuff that they wanted to do anyway. But the comparison I try to make with the recent shootings, and what I would make also with how we reacted after 9/11 was, when do you make your best decisions? I mean, in your personal life, do you ever think that, when I'm emotional and I've just been through something terrible, that's when I'm going to make really good decisions? No, you have to calm down. You have to think rationally. That's how you make good decisions in your everyday life, in your work life. And it's no different. And political decisions are no different. Policy decisions are no different. So making policy decisions out of a knee jerk because you're, oh my gosh, this great tragedy happened. it's the wrong way to approach it. And it reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever read this, but it was like a short article that was written by Harry Brown, who was the Libertarian candidate in 2096. This was he wrote this on September 12th, 2001. So immediately after, and it's titled "When Will We Learn?" And it basically just goes, and it is what is missing at that time is to be, I don't want to say dispassionate. I mean, it's still passionate because we recognize the tragedy, the loss of life. But you have to be honest with yourselves. You can't just get into this tunnel vision. You have to realize, how did we get here? How did this happen? And what are the contributing factors? And be thoughtful in this. Too often we're not, and the debates become so dishonest. You care more about, gun rights than dead children. No, it's that the abridgment of gun rights has created this epidemic where, and again, we can get into debates about how widespread the issue is or what the magnitude of the issue.
Yeah.
But that this issue occurs has a lot to do with the fact that we create essentially these soft targets via the gun-free zones and everything else that create an opportunity, an invitation for a maniac who wants to collect a whole bunch of bodies on the way out, wants to make a splash. They're not going. Yeah, I always make the joke of that they're not going to. You're never going to see a mass shooter go to a gun range to go try to take people out.
To that
they're not
point,
looking to. They may be good with dying, but they don't want to like fire off 2 stray bullets and then die from return fire. Okay, they want to rack up a body count before they go. And where's the best place to do that? It's where their people are defenseless. We shouldn't be making people defenseless. We should allow people the means to defend themselves. Not force it upon them, but the people who are willing, willing to take on that responsibility, allow them to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two big points on that. One is that, in the last 2 years, 86% of mass shootings happen in those gun-free zones, the areas where people are stripped of their rights for a mere geolocation of where they are. And the second thing was to highlight the fact that they will target these things, and maybe I'll just say it, the dishonesty of the media and the way that they portray these situations. The Pulse shooter in Florida down that way, he went to multiple bars that night to find which one was an unarmed one. They portrayed it as an attack on the LGBT community, but it wasn't that.
Last Saturday was 6 years since the Pulse shooting. And I actually posted an article talking specifically about this because it was it came out during the trial of his wife, because they were trying to go after his wife as if she was an accomplice. The reality was she was more of like basically a domestic abuse survivor. She was a victim of this guy as well, by at least all the evidence that came out. I think that's why she was acquitted, at least in part, and really didn't have anything to do with this. But yeah, no, that was one of the things that came out. He looked at a couple other targets prior to that and then backed off because he perceived that there was going to be too much armed resistance, armed security or police or whatever were there. And he said, and this, I can't remember exactly where I read this, so take it with a grain of salt if you want. But, he was just looking up nightclub. I know that much, at least in terms of like his search. So he didn't even know. And I recall hearing, and like I said, I don't know where, so take it with a grain of salt. But I remember hearing, anecdotally at least, that he went there and he did, even once he arrived there, he didn't realize it was a gay club. He went and asked the bartender, "Hey, where are all the women?"
Yeah, he was actually, so that quote of "where are the women" was at other bars. When he went to them, they were armed, and he asked them, "Where's the women at?" And then they were like, "Pulse." And so for anyone who hasn't been out to a gay nightclub, there are men and women abound. There are a lot of straight women who just love hanging out with gay guys. It's an incredible way. Back in my bachelor days, I may have frequented a couple of gay bars because the ladies there. It's a weird perception, but it happens. Everybody knew
I guess,
to go that way. Yeah, exactly. And plus, if you're a good looking young sailor guy like I was, the guys are willing to buy you drinks too. It's a special feeling, but just don't go home with them. But but he went there, and just as you said, he was like, I gotta find a soft target. Where's the women at? He goes to the Pulse Club, didn't know it was a gay club, but the media ran with it in that way. And so, it's important that as we push liberty, that we have those communications of, here's the actual truth behind it. And it's they put us behind the eight ball because we have to fight against the narrative that they've put out there, and also encourage, educate, and invigorate people to go, you have to go somewhere else for this information. You have to go to Muddy Waters Media, because they're going to wait the 24 hours to get as much information before they even speak on a topic, to make sure that they're getting things right rather than being first.
Yeah.
But so we started down the road of red flag laws, and I really wanted to harp on this a little bit, because you have this narrative being pushed out by the media and by Marco Rubio, by my Senator Lindsey Graham, and everything else, that somehow these red flag laws are going to be better. So, if I was a potential voter for you, red flag laws are a good thing. How are you going to compete? How do you challenge that?
I think you need to separate the, sort of the idealized narrative. And this is true of a lot of, great proposals for laws, is how's it going to actually be used? What do you actually think? If you're going to set realistic expectations for yourself. Now, remember what happened in this particular case in Uvalde, which was, essentially the police. I mean, I've said a few times, basically we're protecting the shooter by keeping everybody outside, ensuring that nobody came in to offer resistance. And for what, an hour, 90 minutes, something along those lines. So I think one of the things we need to get out of our head is sort of that institutionally, I don't want to disparage universally police officers. I think there are people who have genuine intentions, who get involved in law enforcement, and and may go different paths. But institutionally, I don't think it has a priority of intervening in these kind of situations to prevent the loss of life. And certainly we see in other instances or interactions where the loss of life is obviously driven by police policy, when you've got a SWAT team kicking down a door in the middle of the night to serve a search warrant. A search warrant,
for marijuana.
It's not like on TV. You see on TV the detective, they knock on the door, the person, I'm not going to let you in. No, I got a warrant. You're going to let us in. And then maybe you've got the other guys as backup if you meet resistance. But you're just going to kick the door down for a search warrant. I mean, I could understand if you got like, it's a hostage situation. You think somebody's, something really terrible is happening inside. But a search warrant, it all seems very misguided.
Yes.
And so with that as the context, who do you think these kind of laws are going to be applied to? And remember, even if it sounds perfectly reasonable, think of who's been getting labeled as domestic terrorists within the last year. Parents going and arguing at school board meetings, whether it's about masks or about classroom content or whatever. That's who's been getting labeled as extremists and terrorists and all this sort of business. So you got to really, the question is, who do you trust? Okay. Who do you trust to make the decision about who's going to be able to have firearms? Because whose hands are you putting it in? When you're talking about the law, you're talking about the government, you're talking about them taking control over this part of your life, and in particular your rights. This is a constitutional right, but even beyond the Constitution, the right to self-defense is a basic human right. And in order to be able to execute that, in order to be able to exercise that, you need to be able to have the means for self-defense. And obviously in modern times, that can very much involve firearms. And so, the idea that we're going to trust the government to
discern that without due process,
make this discernment, to not abuse this power. And this is another, again, somewhat tangential, I guess, but a general sort of critique of government in general, and can be applicable to the police. And part of what I think, one of the things, it's a little more complicated without going into too much the rabbit hole, but power attracts people who want to have it and people who want to abuse it. Okay. This is a lot of power to say who's not going to have the right to self-defense. There's other downstream effects when you start considering, okay, Here's a scenario for you. How about military veteran who, again, comes back, he's trained, and he understands proper use of firearms, and he values his Second Amendment right, but he's also dealing with PTSD. He naturally, and we know this is a massive epidemic. We know about the suicide rates that are off the charts. It's another part, going back to the foreign policy, part of just the outright tragedy of it, and why it should be such a moral outrage for every American, that we are a party to it. And you think about that guy and ask yourself now, is this going to make him more or less likely to seek out mental health, services, to seek out help? Or is this going to disincentivize him from doing that? Because now, he's worried if he says the wrong thing, or you understand what I'm doing? You start to create these weird, bad incentives, and it creates a problematic situation. It's just one thing on top of the other. Again, it's another big government solution to a government created problem that is either going to create more problems, exacerbate some of the same problems, without even really dealing with the original problem. Because, again, odds are if they had the information on these guys, they could have been watching. They could have, they could have stepped in at various points. Hell, in those 77 minutes, they could have stepped in if that was the priority, and they could have stopped it a lot sooner. But that's not what they did. And, I think also back to, obviously, here in Florida, one of the ones that got red flag laws so moving ahead here in Florida. And obviously, I think Rubio's been pushing him nationally since this time, was the shooting at Stoneman Douglas, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High, Parkland. But that, and people look at that as a failure of laws in terms of restrictions and everything. No, it's a failure of government agents, law enforcement. There was, I think, people had given tips to everybody from the county sheriff to the FBI that this guy was a loose cannon, that he was dangerous, and nobody did anything. And at what point, do we say maybe the answer isn't to just further empower government to go and seek out other people, but instead the answer is for each one of us to not be a soft target? I'll give you another way to frame it out. And this is way too long an explanation.
No,
so
it's good information.
But I mean in the sense, in the political sense, that look, if somebody asked me that question like you just did, this answer is way too long. So I'm going to try to kind of bring this back of who do you trust for this? When I hear, one of the things I heard, and I think this was more in response to the Buffalo shooting, was basically like, we know that these guys go and seek out soft targets. We know that. That's a factor with them. We've got enough data at this point to understand that. But, the people who think from the central planning perspective, which is the Republicans and Democrats, well, how do you harden, you can't put police and armed guards in every single building in the world, or in the country, whatever. You can't do that. So how do you do it? Well, you don't centralize it. You don't make a top-down decision. We're going to protect this, we're going to protect that, and we're going to spend more money here to do this. The answer is decentralize down to the individual level.
Yes.
And you restore and respect and uphold the individual right to defend themselves. And you stop creating soft targets. The soft targets exist because we create them. Some might exist anyway. Look, and that's to be fair. Some might exist. We can't promise utopia. But I think as the Thomas Sowell quote always is, there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
I love that.
What's the best trade-off we can get? I think the best trade-off that saves the most lives, saves the most innocent lives, protects the most kids, is the one where we don't create these soft targets by demanding that anybody who is competent and is willing to and would carry a firearm cannot do so. Because we ensure that here's this building full of people and all these kids cordoned off in these separate rooms, the ducks in a barrel. Yeah. For a guy to just come in and just blow them all away. And we're going to make sure that he's got plenty of time. So it doesn't even matter how much the magazine capacity, who cares? Yeah. This guy had more than an hour. He had plenty of time to reload as he goes from classroom to classroom.
And
this guy was not. So who cares if it's 30-round magazine, 10-round magazine, 100-round, who cares? He's got all the time in the world because, they're stopping him. So let the people have the means to defend themselves. I think that's the right answer.
Absolutely. And a couple things that you pointed out, and I wanted to speak to one of them particularly, was the mental health aspect, right? This is a big thing with the red flag laws. If somebody's mentally unstable, we'll catch them through this process, and they'll get taken care of. When I was in the submarine force, I suffer from PTSD, and so I, sitting in port one day and kind of went through some issues, and I went to military doctor, and I was like, hey, here's the issues I'm facing. They prescribed me a drug. That drug took me away from service, from submarines, took me out of the nuclear community. If I'd known that would have been the circumstance or the consequence of just being out of that form of military service, there would have been a weighing of the scales for me to make that decisions. And now you're going to say, if somebody has PTSD, somebody has, anger issues, as subjective as that, for another person to view that, this person's really angry. Well, he was working on his car and he lost his 14th 10mm socket. Like, could you fault him for it? So he kicked the pail. As soon as he gets addressed as as an angry person, now the law enforcement's coming in, no due process for him, because all of the secret court has been going on, basically, where somebody makes a report, police say, hey, here you go, judge signs off of it, rubber stamps, they show up at the house, and they come to take your guns. There's no due process as of defined in the Constitution for these people. You're pushing people away from getting mental health when they need it. And in the case of Gary Willis, who was from Maryland, when red flag laws were first passed in Maryland, he was a 63-year-old. Cops show up at 5 o'clock in the morning and knock on his door and say, give us your guns. He says no. Gary Willis is left dead that day. It's a heartbreaking circumstance where, as you pointed out, these aren't addressing the circumstances as to why they're standing on the bodies of these people to proclaim this is the solution. They just want to politicize it and push their agenda while standing on the bodies of others. And so I think it's incredibly important that we talk about why they're standing on the bodies to push their agenda, how these agendas are not actually going to address the issues, as you've shown, but also the negative impacts and the growth of government, how much more catastrophic that becomes, rather than understanding that this was, like when we talked about the foreign war before, it was too much government involvement, intervention in these areas that have made these circumstances worse, that causes a blowback, that causes more pain, more hurt, and everything else. More government is not the problem is not the solution to the problem of too much government. So
yeah. No, and I went through all that and didn't even get to the due process aspect of it. No, yeah, this is the thing, and people have got to understand, and to take it another route. I mean, I was here. I shouldn't say always, but here occasionally, the statistic, oh, there's more guns in America than there are people. Okay, all these gun owners aren't crazy mass murderers. The overwhelming majority of these people, the overwhelming majority of gun owners are respectful, law-abiding people. Even if some, where like we talk about, are dealing with some mental health issues, but who can blame certainly someone who's coming out of difficult experience in the military? Who can blame them for having a negative view of government leadership? But hey, that might be somebody dangerous. You got to watch out. You can't let him have it. That's who's going to get targeted. It's not going to be this random, and in this particular case, this random kid who hadn't committed a crime before. So he, of course, he passes a background check and everything else. So he goes forward, he gets, and even then, that's a sort of a sketchy situation where in terms of how did this kid afford these guns? That's a whole nother angle of the conspiracy theory. We don't really even need to go down that route, but it is interesting to ask. And another interesting thing, if you haven't seen it, this is totally off tangent from any of the things we talk about, because it's really, January 6th is really not that interesting. But if you think January 6th is that interesting, I would, really encourage everyone to watch. There's this little clip. It's only like 2 minutes or so, but it's Ted Cruz, who I don't really have a great opinion of, but whatever, this is good work, was questioning somebody from the FBI. Somebody from the FBI was testifying there. And basically every question is like, I can't answer that, which is all like, hey, were FBI agents involved in this thing? Hey, were FBI agents committing violent crimes on January 6th? Hey, was this guy a Fed? Hey, was this? And there's no answers. There's no clarity. And it's worthwhile to just go and see that to kind of get a little bit of perspective. But this is, that's federal law enforcement. This is the reality of, the reality of government, which is not the TV show reality of it. Unfortunately, the TV show reality is, again, a detective knocks on the door. Hey, can you show us around? We have a warrant to search this place. Or no, it's a SWAT team, like you said, 5 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes it's even at more interesting times than that. Give us your stuff. We're coming in, or nothing. Or if it's a no-knock warrant, which is which is not a whole nother, but another aspect to it. What are we doing? Or I should just say, look, it's got to inform our realization about the nature of government and the nature of power and what it does and why it is so important to limit and dismantle it and not stop creating the conditions, stop and then start rolling back all of the conditions that are being created where someone who hasn't committed a crime, and let me be more specific about that, someone who has not violated the rights of another individual, who has not violated the basic rights of another individual, that we're not sending police to go after those people to violate their rights, due process, property, self-defense. We shouldn't be doing that. We never should be initiating any of those kind of interactions with people who have not done that. And that spans a wide gamut of stuff. But that's the reality also, is that liberty is not, one little thing. It's not just gun rights. It's not, the right to decide what you consume and put in your body. It's all of those things.
Yeah.
And when you understand the principles, it all comes back together, and you recognize how far off the path we are. To kind of, again, bring it around, it is, and the tremendous harm being done because of it. That's one of the things I've come to realize, is that every time we have policies that deviate from these principles, it's tremendous amount of harm is done, and you don't even really solve the problems that you ever set out to do. And we just do more and more of it and double down on this approach to solving problems, and we never solve the problems, and we create new problems, and all the while we keep spending more and more and end up being poorer, and we're 30 trillion in debt now, and it is a big mess. And we didn't even get to 8% inflation yet. So go figure. The issue that's affecting the most people, doesn't affect people in the way that's the most drastic of, like, people getting killed, innocent people getting killed, but it is something that is affecting basically everybody.
Yes.
I know the celebrities say just, hey, get an electric car and you don't have to worry about the price of gas. But the reality for real people in regular life is that you're feeling it, man. You drive by and you see the gas station, and it's around $5, and it's painful. And so, and again, it didn't happen in a bubble. It's a consequence of all of this stuff. And the stuff that we've insisted on doing. Obviously, it went into overdrive over the last couple of years. With everything that went on with COVID and the lockdowns and disruption of economic activity. But, there's a better way. And,
yes.
And that might take a little more time than we have to talk about, but
Absolutely.
I'll wrap it. I'll bring it back around and say that's why I'm, in the middle of doing this, is because the recognition of that. And so, why it's so important, I think, to have a libertarian in this position to be a part of the conversation in what I anticipate will be one of the more high-profile races in the country. This Senate race, Marco Rubio, obviously being a former presidential candidate, Val Demings is a sitting congresswoman, but was pretty big in the Biden Veep stakes back in 2020. So both figures who have a bit of a national profile, and and who are also, like I said, quite similarly awful in terms of supporting infringements upon due process and the Second Amendment, and consistently supporting the military-industrial complex and rubber stamping every NDAA, every amount of spending, $40 billion for Ukraine, so that make sure that they can, by the end of the summer, that they'll have that will have given them more than the entire Russian military budget, I guess. It's madness. Mm-hmm. But that's what we got, and I think Florida deserves better than that.
Absolutely, and that's it. We have to get a libertarian on that debate stage, because You need to have an adult amongst the kids, and you know, they can spout off on how they want to violate your rights, and as you put it, you know, we're here for your rights all the time. We want to make sure that people who aren't doing harm to others aren't being harmed themselves. And so, you know, it's incredible that you're doing this. It's such a tremendous opportunity. So if you guys are listening to this, you guys are watching this right now, head on over to Misigoy.com. That's Misigoy. Donate, share it, spread the word, spread the message, help be a part. If you're in the state of Florida or near that, reach out, get a part of the campaign, go canvass, make phone calls, door knock, do whatever it is you can, help him out. Let's get Marco Rubio unseated. Let's get some real good policy there. We're going to continue on with these conversations, of course, in the future, of what you can do in order to help spread liberty, of effective ways of talking about the issues, talk about what it is that needs to happen, why these issues are happening, talk about a little bit of the history, and talk about how other people's proposals aren't actually addressing it, right? The best of intentions with bad plan still leads you down to hell. So we gotta fight that fight. But Dennis, man, I appreciate you so much for hopping on here today. I want to give you a couple minutes. If you want to wrap things up, go ahead, plug anything, everything, future events, websites, all of that.
Events, actually next Tuesday in Orlando, LP of Orange County. I've got the event on my website, probably posted on the social medias as well. I'll be speaking there at 6 p.m. Next Tuesday night. I don't have too many other things planned out past that just yet. Like I said, we're kind of we were kind of overwhelmed with the whole qualification over the last couple of weeks, so we're wrapping that up, and I'm trying to think what else really to say. You know, I think everybody here has, you know, we've kind of talked a lot about the principles, and I think all the great harm that's being done. And that's what motivates me. And if it motivates you as well, like you said, you know, please come out, visit the site. If you can contribute what you can. Unfortunately, it's not easy for us to get the message out. So we try to reach as many people as we can, but we need everybody's help to be able to do that. So all the help you guys can give makes all the difference in the world. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, guys, help him out. He's going to be stretching your dimes into dollars and making this an incredible event. And so with that, guys, I want to thank you guys all for being a part of today's episode. It was incredible. I love Dennis and the way that he's able to portray that stuff out. And he hits on a lot of those important notes, right? As libertarians, we often talk about the foreign wars and talk about the history and how we may have been a big piece of how 9/11 happened. We are a big piece in the harm and the wrongdoing there in Yemen, and even Ukraine. There's a little bit of U.S. intervention there. So, you know, it's great to be able to talk about those things in a foreign policy sense, but also being able to talk about those things in a domestic sense and being able to, you know, push out that message to help change hearts and minds. So incredibly appreciative of Dennis for him to be able to come step out here and join us. And I look forward to seeing his campaign continue to be successful in everything that they're doing. And I'm sure we'll try to wrap him back in to come join us during the campaign to give us updates and to continue on with these conversations. But I want to thank you guys all so much for being here today. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying the new segments of Muddy Waters of Freedom with Matt Wright and Spike Cohen, where they've broken this up into 3 episodes. The first 2 episodes are public facing everywhere you normally get your Muddy Waters content, but the third one is by the exclusive group. So make sure you guys are heading over to anchor.fm/muddiedwaters/subscribe to get a part of that. Tonight, if you guys haven't gotten enough of me, I'm going to be heading on over. I will be on TC Pearson's podcast. So the Black Robe Regiment will be going on there. He's an incredible guy. He's got a really cool history. He was a former law enforcement agent, and he was one of the good guys, i.e. he was reporting on issues within the department. He was not willing to just turn a blind eye when things were going wrong, and it actually costed him his career. So it's going to be an incredible conversation. I'm going to be posting those in Muddy Waters Facebook groups and everywhere else. I'll be on my personal Facebook page, so make sure you guys tune into that tonight. That'll be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And I'm excited for that conversation. We'll continue following up with Dennis on his campaign and his successes, and continue to build on those. If you guys haven't already signed up for the Americans for Prosperity event in August, get set up and get your time off if you need it to be out there. And election night, LP Brevard, Florida. Get down there and come hang out with me and Spike and a bunch of other amazing people, Matt and Sarah and Bootleg Libertarian. It'll be a star-studded event. But with that, guys, I hope you guys have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope you guys stay well, stay safe, keep fighting the good fight. Love you all.